What is going on, Coffee Nation? Welcome to my second engraving guide. This time we're going to be covering all the DLC engravings. I'm going to go over use cases and options for each engraving. Some engravings are just always good, some engravings have specific use cases, so let's jump in. Alright, beginnings. Beginnings is objectively one of the best engravings in the game. It just gives you damage, it gives you hits, it gives you crit, avoid, and dodge. This is good on literally any weapon because it just boosts damage and accuracy and crit. It just free stat increases. So this is one of the most desirable engravings. I generally put it on Eliers' weapon personally. You can also put it on Chloe's weapon or an early game hard carry, depending on who you want to run. But this is just pure upside. There's no downside to this at all. You just get a huge advantage from using it, and everyone wants it on their weapon. Alright, next we have Echoes. Echoes reduces might by 1, but it also reduces weight by 1 and increases dodge. So this is a crit avoid weapon, but it can also be used to blatantly disrespect enemies who can crit you. So if an enemy has a killer weapon or some kind of high crit rate, you can just walk up to them with this unit that has this weapons, or that has their weapon engraved with this, and just blatantly disrespect their crit. It'll just nullify their crit. If they have like 20 to 30% crit rate, it's gone. So you also can weight fix with this. So weight fixing is reducing the weight of a weapon to enable doubling to reduce the speed reduction on units with low build who are using heavier weapons. So it's a weight fixing weapon and it's a crit avoid weapon. And I think a lot of people don't like to run it because it reduces damage, but I actually find it to be really useful. You can throw it on like a Levin sword, a Bolganone early game. You can throw it on anything that needs its weight reduced. Even like a steel or silver sword on units who are trying to use those weapons. Or a steel and silver axe. Or lance, whatever, you know. Whichever weapon needs its weight reduced. The crit avoid aspect of it, though, like, is useful, especially if you're doing Iron Man. So if you want a unit to, like a dedicated unit who can actually kill these crit enemies at like melee range or something so that they still counterattack. So if you want to like one round them with the power carry or something like that, you can just negate the crit. So pretty useful for that. Holy is very similar to Beginnings. It's pure upside. There's no downside to using it. You get damage, you lose weight, and you get avoid. So this is good on avoid builds. This is good on weight fixing weapons for units with low build. This is good for just dealing damage. Now, if you have a unit who has high build, who doesn't need weight fixing and you want to increase their damage, you want genealogy. Genealogy increases damage, hit, and avoid, but it also increases weight by 1. So you can use this on units who aren't going to double anyways. You can use this on weapons that can't double or follow up. You can use this on units whose weapon weight is low and they can easily handle it, so high build units or medium build units using lighter weapons to damage boost them. This is great on the hero's weapons. I usually use this on the hero's sword, and then I use this on a unit who needs weight fixing, and then I use this on a unit who doesn't need weight fixing and can just handle their weapon. But this is a really good emblem as well, or engraving. Next we have Binding. So this increases the weight, it also reduces avoid, and it increases the might by 2. So you do lose 30 avoid, so any plans of avoid tanking on this particular engraving are pretty much thrown out the window. This is basically useful for hitting really hard. You're throwing out weight and you're throwing out avoid to hit +2 might. Now this is good on things like longbow, Thoron, El Thunder, anything that like pokes that's not going to double anyways, or a unit who can't double, or a unit who can't avoid. So if you're on Ike, for example, and you're engaged, you can't avoid on Ike. If you're engaged, it's physically impossible. Enemies always hit you when you're engaged on Ike. So if you have, for example, like a great axe or a great sword or a great lance, and you're enemy phasing, you're probably going to get doubled anyways. You're not doubling yourself, so this is another use case, but it's good for damage. All right, Lin, Blazing. So this increases hit rate, this increases crit rate, and this reduces weight. It does, however, give you -3 might. So while it enables crits and makes you very accurate and weight fixes, it does reduce damage. So this is usually used on crit weapons, though reducing damage on crit weapons hurts. But as you'll see as we go on, some of the crit enabling engravings do enable crits like on you as well. So there's like trade-offs. So trading might for weight reduction, hit increase, and crit isn't bad, and there are a lot of use cases. So you can use this on weapons with insanely high might so that the -3 might doesn't hurt them. So for example, if you want an enemy phase with great weapons, increasing the hit rates on them is good. If you want to enable crits on a specific weapon, like a killer axe, this can be useful. This is, typically used on something like Panette Killer Axe. Her strength is so high, she can still deal lethal damage even though the might is reduced. So anything that can still hit hard, anything that needs weight fixed. The weight fixing, losing 3 points of damage is terrible though. So I wouldn't use this for weight fixing. You could, but losing that much damage is very painful, especially on units who have low build, who tend to also have low strength. But crit enabling, hit enabling, I would say it's best on like axes and crit builds. Sacred, so here's exactly what I was talking about. So you gain 20 crit, but you also lose 20 crit avoid, and you also lose avoid, and you gain hit. So it can be risky to use because you're enabling crits on the unit that's running this. So if you're using something like Thunder, like the Dire Thunder build, this is an obvious use case. You can use this on units who can tank crits, like if they're on a tanky class and it doesn't matter. So you could use this for fixing damage or fixing hit rates, and also for increasing crit rates. So both of those use cases. If you throw this on like a general, if you run a general or something that's very tanky, like an Ike user, getting crit on Ike doesn't really matter that much if your defense is high enough and you're taking half damage. So you can kind of get away with running like a Chimera Killer Lance on this, so that if an enemy crits you and she's taking half damage anyways, it's probably fine. So there's ways of getting around the incoming crits. Alright, Ike is the same thing as Roy. It doesn't reduce the avoid, but the weight becomes insane. So this is only really good on single hitting weapons or weapons that just want to hit really hard. You can also run Ike and Roy on crit weapons because each point of damage, each point of might gets multiplied by 3. So if you crit for, 15, that's 45. And then if you crit for, plus 3 more, that's plus 9 extra damage. So that's huge. It can also be great on Thoron. It can be good on Brave Axe with Panette, for example. Longbows, things like this. Certain units can double with Longbow, so I wouldn't always throw it on Longbow. So just a consideration. Alright, Dawn. This one is really good on your Dancer, on an Avoid tank, on anything that wants Avoid. It does weight fix. It also reduces might by 3, but it gives you 40 avoid and 20 dodge. So it gives you crit avoidance, really good crit avoidance. It gives you insane dodge. So you can throw this on utilities who you don't want to attack just for the dodge or for the avoid. You can throw it on dodge tanks in general so that they are passively very dodge tanky. So if you want to throw this on fast units who have high speed, which makes them gain avoid because speed scales avoid, you can do that. The weight or the damage reduction does hurt, but if you're on a unit who has like lance or sword power, you can just straight up make a dodge tank that disrespects enemies and just flies or walks right up to them, smacks them, takes no damage in return from the high avoid, and just kills things in enemy phases. So there's some huge advantage here. And at the very least, you can throw this on Sadal's weapon so that if he ever gets attacked, he has very high dodge rates. You can throw this on your bonded shield user so that if they ever get attacked, they have very high dodge rates. It's mostly used for the avoid, but the dodge also is nice for crit avoid, and the weight reduction is kind of nice for doubling. The might kind of hurts it, but it's not the worst thing. Alright, then we have Lucina. I typically use this for hit increase and for the weight reduction, but it also does give 30 avoid. So it has -1 damage, but it has really good stats, like plus 30 hit, plus 30 avoid, -1 weight. This is fantastic for dodge tanking, for improving hit rates on units who have bad hit rates. I typically use this on Ivy, on her Bolganone, to weight fix it, to increase her hit rate, and also to make her kind of like an avoid tank. And if you run like Lyn on her as well, she gets a ton of speed, which enables her to double, and then she actually becomes high dodge rate. But this could be run, that combo could be run on any unit. to give them high dodge rate just from speed in this 30 avoid. So the avoid is nice, the hit increase is nice, the weight fixing is nice. This, I would say, is also one of the better emblems out there. Some of these are very like situational, but they're still really good. This one just feels like a better version of this with slightly less avoid. Fates. Alright, so Fates gives you 30 crit, so Sacred gives you 20, and Blazing gives you 20. Fates gives you plus 30 crit and plus 30 dodge. You do lose 2 points of damage, but you also gain 10 avoid. So if you're going for a crit build, and you don't want to deal with the huge damage reduction of Lynn, or the incoming crits of Erica, this gives you the most crit out of the base game emblems, engravings, and it also gives you crit avoid. So you can reliably tank crits and deal crits. So pretty useful. The weight or the might reduction. This is really good on Panette. I would say this is probably one of her best things for her killer axe. You know, getting her crit rates to 100%. Combining Wrath with this and her passive, you can easily hit 100% crit rates. Okay, and then we have... It's also just nice for crit avoid too, but... Then we have Academy. This one is very similar to Awakening in that it's good for hit fixing. So plus 30 hit, plus 10 avoid, plus 10 crits, plus 30 dodge, plus 2 weight. This is good on units who can handle the weight. This is good for hit fixing axes, for example. The dodge is nice, it's just a bonus, but I would say you mostly would be using this for hit fixing units who can handle weight. So it's also good on like the hero's weapons, which have very low weight. So for example, if you ran this on the hero's axe, you know, on an axe user, they tend to have over 12 build. So it would be, I think it's 10 base weight, and then its weight reduces. So you could have an axe with really good hit rate, some dodge, some crit for, you know, 9 weight, which most units can handle. But it's usually used for hit fixing, in my opinion, and crit avoid. Okay, and then we have Eliers Engraving. So this one does a lot. It gives you plus 20 on hit, avoid, dodge, and crit. Minus 1 weight, minus 1 damage. So it's a weight fixing thing, it's a hit fixing thing, crit increase, avoid increase, crit avoid. This is really good for just general crit build because similar to the other ones, it gives you plus 20% crit, but it gives you plus 20% crit without a huge reduction in damage and without a huge risk of 20% incoming crits. So this is arguably one of the better average stat crit enablers. So that I would use it for that. I wouldn't really use it for hit fixing because the 20 crit with very few downsides. The only downside is minus 1 damage. This is a really good crit enabling engraving, and it also gives you crit avoid and avoid, and more hit and weight reduction. So it does a lot of things. For 1 point of damage, it's well worth it, and you know, it's definitely better than this, right? So I would rather have this than Awakening, so it's really good. Okay, Dragons. This one is good. I love this one. This is really good on Brave Weapons. It gives you plus 2 damage. Now it's kind of similar to Erica in terms of stats. It doesn't give you hit, but you know you get minus 20 avoid and dodge. So that's the cost, but it gives you plus 2 damage. This is really good on Brave Weapons, especially if you're on a unit who can quad consistently. That's plus 8 damage on Brave. This is also good on just anything that doubles, but it's good on any art user who can quad or any Brave weapon that can quad. And as long as you aren't taking lethal damage in response, or there's like high incoming crits that are actually a threat, this is really good. I used this on my 5-man Maddening DLC run. That was my first DLC run on a Brave sword with sword power, and it absolutely destroys. It's crazy. It's really good on quadding weapons or doubling weapons because it's plus 2 damage. All right, then we have your boy Hector with the strength engraving. So you get plus 3 damage and plus 3 weight, and you get avoid and dodge minus 30. This I used on effective weapons. I think I used this on like an Armor Slayer or a Rider's Bane, because the idea is you just hit them so hard they die before they can counterattack, and I think that's its use case. Or if you want to just damage boost like a Thoron or a Longbow or something that you're not going to be getting counterattacks on, it's decent. The weight increase, +3 weight is not trivial. So if you're already not doubling with a weapon, giving yourself +3 damage is probably fine. I would say effective weapons that aren't doubling, or just, you know, Rider's Bane is pretty good on it. Okay, and then we have Acumen. So this one's also really good. It's very similar to Tiki. It's actually pretty much the same thing as Tiki, but it's better. It just has -10 avoid instead of -20. So, you know, really good on brave weapons, good on arts and, you know, braves. Good on doubling weapons too, but I would say it really benefits. The more times you can hit, the better, because you're getting a damage increase without a weight increase, and brave weapons are heavy, so it's uniquely good in that way, and that both of these enable braves. Okay, and then we have the Bonds engraving. So this one, this is crazy. This is basically Sigurd 2.0 without the hit increase. So you lose weight, you gain might, you gain avoid and dodge. This is just pure upside. Throw it on any weapon you want. It's obviously not going to enable crits, but this is very powerful. It does say Divine Dragon, or I'm sorry, that's Willy Glands. Ignore that. I was reading the Willy Glands Divine Dragon only thing for a second. All right, Revelation. So +1 might, +1 weight, +30 crit, -20 avoid and dodge. This is arguably the best crit enabler. Now you're taking on some risk by increasing incoming crits, but if you're using things like Chain Guard, Bonded Shield, it doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter if you're using those tactics. But you get a damage increase, you get 30 crit rate for 1 point of weight. This is the best crit enabler, because the only other thing that gives 30 crit is Fates, and you lose 2 damage to do that. This is much safer to use, though. This actually makes you more survivable. This makes you less survivable, but this gives you, you know, essentially +3 damage if you're just single hitting with a crit, which is huge, instead of losing 3 damage. And you also get the 30 crit rate. All right, Rivals. This is also fantastic. This is very similar to Genealogy in that you get 1 weight, but you get damage, you get hit, you get avoid, and you get crit. So you get a little bit of everything. And usually this is good on, well, it's not usually good. This is good on units who can handle the extra point of weight, which is most units. And if you're running the hero's weapons, they have low weight, so you can easily run this on a hero's weapon. You can use this on anything that needs a little bit of extra hits. You can use this for damage fixing. It's just a good overall engraving. All right, and then finally we have heroes. So this is crazy. Actually, this is definitely interesting. So you're losing hit. This is one of the few, I think this is the only one that actually reduces your hit rate. I think this is literally the only one that does that. Yeah. So you lose hit rate, you gain 1 damage, you lose 2 weight, you gain avoided dodge, and you lose crit. So this, if you're on a unit who isn't critting and who has high hit rates, so for example, Eliers on certain swords that are very accurate, you can take advantage of the damage and the weight reduction, the damage increase and the weight reduction. Now, arguably, most weapons that have high accuracy already have low weight. So really this is kind of like a lance thing, I want to say. Like if you want to run like Brionac or something obscure like that, I would say it's kind of useful for that. Reducing hit by 20 can be irrelevant if you're on someone like Chimera and she has like really high dex. If her dex is like 40, you're going to be hitting everything. Like 40 dex is crazy accurate for the most part. So let's actually see. Let's check out some of my units to like get a feel for how this would affect them. All right, so let's say this would be a good candidate for it, assuming that you don't have the build for it. Let's go to Brionac though. I think I have that. Let's test it out. Let's put Brionac on her. All right, so hit of 70. All right, so she would be 150 hit. So I guess she still would have some issues, even though her dex is very high. So let's get a feel for what we're looking at. It's an interesting engraving for sure. All right, Brionac. Let's go for it. 50 hit.
I'll be here.
Let's see. All right, what's your hit rate on that thing? Okay, so she'd be 150 versus 201. All right, let's check other units just to kind of compare. It might be the case that the hit rate inconsistency hurts. Yeah, like 204. Yeah, because some of the endgame enemies have pretty decent dodge rates. 208. You kind of want to hit like the 180 range, so I guess it would make it a little difficult to run. Let's check out the weight reduction on this thing. So even with the weight reduction, like Brionac is so heavy that it's still too heavy for her, and it's still reducing her speed by 3, which is unfortunate. Now Brionac is nice in that it gives huge damage bonus, and it does 1 to 2 range, but there's very few things that I would run this on. You'd kind of need to run it on something that's already very accurate. But losing 20 hit is a problem, and for +1 damage, I'm not really sure that it's that good. For like, you know, +1 damage for the... Like, there's better things that give +1 damage. The avoid and the dodge is nice. The crit -20 doesn't matter on certain units. It does matter on the averages game, though. Like, if you are enemy phasing, and you have 10% crit rate, and you attack 10 enemies and tank them all, there's a good chance you crit at least once. And if you're doubling, there's a really good chance you crit at least once or twice. So getting rid of your even your low-end crit rate while enemy phasing can hurt, and increasing the might and reducing the weight is nice, but you're going to have to be on a very accurate unit, and I don't really know how much more accurate you can get than Chimera in this case, because I specifically fed her dex books, and she has like strength dex +5, and she's 44 dex, you know, like, that's like ungodly. That's like ungodly dex for endgame, and she still would have, you know, 150 hit rate. So you hit an enemy that has 70% dodge, and you're looking at, what, like an 80% hit rate? That's not really... I mean, that's okay, and if you get supports to increase the hit rate, it could be decent, but it's debatable as to how good that is. But that's pretty much it for my engraving guide. This is the 2.0 guide, including the DLC. I know people wanted me to cover the DLC, so we'll do that. Alright, so definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Feel free to drop a comment if you have any interesting use cases for the engravings, like specific builds or weapons, and I'll see you in the next one.